Hey, Carly, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Brittany. Thank you for having me here.
Yes, this has been a long time coming.
Yeah, I'm really excited to get on the podcast. I've heard so many great founders and people in the industry speak with you. So excited to be part of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, if you recall, we got introduced over a year ago because I was talking to somebody about Femtech and wanting to be a VC in Femtech. And they said, do you know Carly? And I said, don't know Carly. So we had a call and I was just really impressed by your, dedication to raising a fund to invest in Femtech. What was your experience like hearing me? Because I was still working at a venture fund myself. What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, so you get back then I was getting so many introductions, but I remember speaking with you and you were saying you're going to create a community focused on femtech. And I remember you saying, like, watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a huge community. And time passed. I just saw you start growing this awesome community. And here we are today, where you really did it. So in the past year, congratulations on what you created. That's amazing. And I'll never forget that conversation. It's so cool that you've created so much since then.
Thank you so much, Carly. It is really cool to like hit milestones. Like that's founders, that's what investors are actually looking for. Like you say you're going to do something. That's why relationship building long-term with investors is so important, because like a year ago I was nothing, but I said, well, this is what my plan is. And like, if I was a startup, Carly may be interested in investing because she's like, this lady does what she says, right?
Yeah, exactly. You killed it. You're killing it.
Well, I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
this community is so needed in this space. I feel like there really wasn't one central hub for everyone to come together, and you've really like outdone yourself. It's awesome to see what you've done.
Well, honestly, it's just I'm just some lady with pink hair who likes to talk about it. And the community obviously wanted it. So I'm so honored to be that, to kind of spearhead it, shepherd it, if you will. But you also have had this really interesting journey of last year you were going to do femtech investing, and now you have this amazing partnership with Healthy Pleasure Group, and you're going to do more sex tech. So I'm really excited to get into that story and that journey of pivoting. I don't think people often see investors pivot, but everyone's pivoting, everybody, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So let's kick it off though with your background. Tell us where you're from. What did you study? Did you have a career before this? And how did you end up here?
Yeah, sure. So I'm from Long Valley, New Jersey, a little over an hour outside of New York City, and went to school in Virginia, University of Virginia, and studied engineering. So I graduated at UVA, moved to New York City, and was an environmental engineer for like about 2 years before moving into finance. I was in Manhattan. All my friends were in finance. So I moved into financial advisory role, advising private equity funds on deals in the renewable energy and infrastructure space. And then moved to a private equity fund, all in Manhattan. So I was on the deal team working on renewable energy deals and infrastructure deals. And then eventually, by the way, I was one of the only women in my fund in North America. So I joined a lot of women investor groups.
Yeah.
I was getting sick of Manhattan, and my fund had an office in LA. So I moved to Los Angeles with my private equity fund. And when I was in LA, all my friends were founders and raising venture capital. And so this is kind of long-winded, but I started connecting.
We love the story. We love all the long-windedness of it.
Okay, good. So I started connecting founders in LA with my investor network in New York City, and realized I could do it at scale if I started an automated kind of platform. So I started the Female Founded Club, which is a sourcing platform for investors to find female-founded startups. And today we're helping over 600 female founders raise capital, which is awesome. We've made hundreds and hundreds of introductions through the platform. We do a number of things like weekly newsletters to investors with new founders that are raising capital. We do weekly pitch sessions. We have a database online of all the founders raising capital. Anyway, through that, I saw a lot of femtech companies that I thought.
Don't move on yet. That's let's just all pause and like everyone listening, just like give a big gratitude energy shot over to Carly. The world needed that. Wow, the world still needs that.
Yeah, it's still working.
Active today, right?
still active today. It's free for founders, free for investors. Investors is just free deal flow, and founders is just free exposure. So
female founder could go on, is it femalefoundedfund.com?
Femalefoundedclub.com.
Club.com. I got the fund on the mind. Femalefounded.com, and they can just go there and post their deal, right? And if you're an investor, you can like subscribe or something to it.
That's exactly right. There is an application process, but really if there's a website, we ask that you upload your pitch deck, and then it only gets exposure to investors. So no other founder will be looking at your pitch deck.
So freaking cool, Carly. Okay, so you start this thing and you're seeing Femtech deals, right? Did you even know what Femtech was at the time?
No, I started to see them. And on a personal note, I have a women's health issue that I went to so many doctors for and didn't get any answers from doctors for over 6 years, spent so much money and time trying to figure out my own health issues, and found it out through like a deep dive Google search, like a 3-hour Google search. And so when I was seeing founders resonate with that story or have their own stories that I resonated with, I was just drawn to this space. And so I was always trying to help these Femtech founders raise capital, and they're the ones I struggled with the most, helping them raise funding.
Out of all the female founders.
Out of all the female founders. This area, it was like the subject matter was like already a non-starter. Who cares what the founder's background is and et cetera. And I thought there needs to be capital dedicated to the space. Like, it's a missed opportunity. The market needs it. Who cares if the VCs don't get it? Let's just start a fund and bring capital there.
Their loss. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's how Amboy Street Ventures was started.
Oh my goodness. So cool. So give us a little bit of a timeline. When did you decide, like, I need to start my own fund?
So I think I decided, I knew I wanted to go off and do something like this, but I was waiting for, I don't know if I should say this, but I was waiting for my bonus at my last job, which came the end of March, and then COVID happened the end of February. So I was like, oh shoot, should I leave my job because we're in the middle of a pandemic? It's not a great time to raise capital for a fund. So I think I stayed on for a couple more months, just trying to see how things were going with the pandemic, what was happening with the stock market. And really, I think started to reach out to people and form the idea in around May of 2020.
Yep.
But everything really came together when I met the Healthy Pleasure Group. And I know you asked about that partnership. I'm happy to go into it.
Yeah, definitely. And when you tell us about it, can you tell us, what was it like before you met them? Because I think that, I'm interested. We have a lot of listeners interested. I think a lot of founders don't even realize VCs fundraise, right? So founders, we fundraise too. It's hard. Okay. Struggle is real on both ends. But what was it like fundraising for Femtech investment and fundraising during a pandemic?
Yeah. So before meeting the Healthy Pleasure Group, it was a lot harder. It's hard to raise as a sole GP, only having a one-man show. LPs worry what happens if, God forbid, you die or something happens to you and you can't run the fund anymore. What happens to their investment and everything you promised them? But there was also a worry that there wasn't a huge value add to the startups besides capital. A huge differentiator for a lot of VCs is they can provide other like connections or some kind of help. And so raising before meeting the Healthy Pleasure Group was definitely harder. Now that we have Healthy Pleasure Group on board, first of all, I have 2 co-GPs. So that's helpful because not only are they awesome, gets rid of the sole GP issue, and I can go into their backgrounds because they really are advantageous. But also we have the Healthy Pleasure Group to help the startups in our portfolio. Still fundraising, there's still challenges, don't get me wrong. And we also shifted our focus from Femtech to be sexual health for all genders and women's health. So it still is Femtech plus men's sexual health.
Yep.
And yeah, I think it's definitely makes us unique with our thesis, but also causes pause for a lot of LPs.
So tell us more about the Healthy Pleasure Group. What is this group? You had this problem of being a sole GP, you solved it. You had a problem with like LP saying, well, what else are you going to support founders with? Apparently Healthy Pleasure Group is like exactly what you needed. So what is that?
Yep. So Dominique Karetzis with the Healthy Pleasure Group, and Mafe, Dr. Maria Godoy, Delia, they are the managing directors of the Healthy Pleasure Group. They have so many facets of the Healthy Pleasure Group, but all of the arms are dedicated to helping startups in the healthy pleasure space. They could do a much better job with an overview of their company, but they do have an agency that can help with BD, corporate strategy. They also have an innovation lab that can do prototyping and data analysis. And Dom, we call her our commercialization expert, and she's a GP of the fund. And then Mafe, Dr. Maria Godoy, she leads the lab, and she's also a GP of the fund. She brings the medical lens to our fund.
I love it. And so let's just clarify real quick. What do you mean by healthy pleasure? Is it all sex tech?
Dom says anything between the belly button and the knees, I think. They look at women's health as well. They have a very broad category within healthy pleasure.
Whoa, that's so cool. What do you think about, like, you originally were more just femtech in general, and now you're still doing femtech, but you're also doing sexual wellness for both genders. Do you feel like particularly passionate about investing in that space too? And if so, why?
Yeah, I think like more than women's health, sexual health has that stigma layer that makes other VCs not go there. Everyone knows, I think that's listening, probably about the vice clause, but beyond the vice clause, if seeing a really sexual health or even sex tech company in a portfolio can give fund managers a little bit of what's the word? Will make them feel a little uncomfortable when they're going to fundraise from their LPs again, or explaining it to their LPs. This is something we don't care about. We want them in our portfolio, and it's distinguishing for that reason. Whereas women's health, really, a lot of generalist investors will look there and don't mind looking there.
Yeah. What is the vice clause? I've recently read about it, but tell our listeners what a vice clause is.
Yeah. So when you're going to raise a fund from these big institutional players, like potentially a pension fund, they'll put a vice clause in your agreement that says, here's our commitment, our capital, you can use it, invest it within your thesis, but you can't invest in anything vice related, which is drugs, alcohol, gambling, sex, because sex is a vice. Sexual health should not be in that clause. And a lot of times it's considered not in that clause, but sometimes it is considered. And really, a fund manager who has that vice clause with their biggest investor might not want to chance it and say, like, is this sexual health company on the line? I don't know, but I don't want to lose this major investor in my next fundraise, because a fund manager usually raises a new fund every few years.
Yes. And so how are y'all going to find LPs? Are you going to do anti-vice clause people?
Yeah, our thesis pretty much rules out anyone who is concerned about a vice clause off the bat. So we really have been focusing more on angel investors, family offices, corporates that can have a strategic advantage by investing in our fund. And then we are speaking with a few bigger institutions that you would think might have issues, but so far so good. Like I said, I think we've gotten the nose up front from the people who would be considering a vice clause.
Yeah. And, what are you most excited about in terms of opportunities that you're seeing in the femtech and sex tech space? Are you seeing things that you're like, your mind is kind of blown? Like, do you have a favorite startup right now, or someone you spoke to recently that you're kind of excited about?
Well, we've already made 2 investments. They're probably the ones I've been the most excited about so far, and we're in the process of making our third. So Dame Products was our first investment, which was an awesome one to kick off with. The reason why I started this fund is because we're trying to change the industry and how the industry sees femtech and sexual health. And Dame is doing an awesome job at it. They tried to advertise the New York subway system, and they are now suing the MTA because they can't get their advertisements there. And that's a huge thing for our industry. And so seeing them being trailblazers and coming out with new innovation all the time is really exciting. And the second investment we've done is Genève, which is product line and telehealth for menopause. You probably saw the Female Founders Fund report that menopause is a $600 billion industry, which totally makes sense because menopausal women have the highest buying power and women spend 80% of the health spending money. And the fact that there's really not too much, so many solutions out there for menopausal women is insane. So a really great opportunity, and Genev's a leader in the space. So we're really excited to support Jill.
That's great. So, because Geneve is not necessarily sexual wellness, right? But maybe they have like I don't know, maybe they have a feature in their platform, but that's not the main focus, right? It's like health for menopause, right?
That's right. So my thesis has women's health is definitely a big part of my thesis.
Yeah. And listeners, if you're interested in learning more about Geneve, it was one of our, I would say in the first 30 episodes we've done, we did an interview with Geneve. So check that out. What is, are you allowed to tell us about your upcoming investment or no? Is it secret?
I'm going to, just out of respect for the founders, keep it confidential, but it should be, I don't want to step on anyone's toes, but well, when we announce it, we'll be sure to send it your way.
Perfect. Maybe by the time this airs, I can say it in the intro. So who knows?
Exactly.
Well, that is so amazing. And, what does the Healthy Pleasure Group, so obviously they're providing like all these resources for the founders, right? Are you the one who's kind of bringing in the capital connection? Like, do you see that as like this beautiful marriage or?
Yeah, so we have two different teams within our fund. One is the investment team, and that's the team I lead. And the other team is the value enhancement team. And that's where the Healthy Pleasure Group sits. So while at my two co-GPs, Dom and Mafe, sit on the investment committee with me, and when we're ready to make an investment, we bring it to the investment committee and I get their insights. I'm really doing all the sourcing, the due diligence, the investment memorandums, et cetera. Whereas the value enhancement team, once we make an investment, they meet with the company and think, how can we add value? And that's where the Healthy Pleasure Group comes in and provides their resources. Oh,
cool. Is there a certain kind of tech product, something that you wish it was, like something that you can give me an opinion based on an investor or your own personal pleasure desire that you wish there was?
I think, like, you mean as an idea for a startup that I wish existed?
Yeah, or like I think like maybe it does, and I hope it comes across my desk.
So I think like what I think is missing the most from the space is education. Like when I was going through my issues and couldn't find the answers, it would be so nice if there was just like a place I could go and know that I could rely on all the information. But it's a really hard business model to have education be venture scalable. And I haven't seen anything come across my desk that has a heavy focus on education, but somehow has a great business model behind it that we can see it becoming a billion or, multi-billion-dollar company. So waiting for that to come through. And if you know of any, let me know.
Yeah, no, we always ask a question, and I'll ask you too at the end of the interview. What is a femtech company that, should exist, or what else does femtech need? And so many people say sex ed. And I usually bring up, yes, and whoever's working on that, God bless you, because we don't know how to do the business model. And also sex ed is for like, we can't just sex ed 30-year-old women. We need a sex ed adolescents and teenagers when unplanned pregnancies happen, STDs happen, and there's shame and there's like all of this stuff happening, but how do you sell sex ed to kids? It's like, there's so many political, government, religious, age of consent, like there's so many barriers to get there. So I'm like, I have no idea how that's going to get solved, but I hope so.
Yeah, I agree. Exactly.
What are like some of the things that you've noticed now as a, GP of a fund that invests in pleasure? Like when you are meeting with like other GPs, like, is it well received? Is it, and I'll give you a little bit of context for why I'm asking this. Me and Jess, we are the GPs of Coyote Ventures. We're raising our fund right now. And we're in an accelerator called Founder Institute VC Lab. And there is nobody else there fundraising or for a femtech fund. And when we talk about it, we're like, yeah, we're the vagina ladies. Like, we're here to talk about your uterus. And, there's like a Canadian fund investing in software as a service, and like someone's doing like space tech and someone's doing supply chain management, and like we show up, we're like clitoris.
Yeah.
That's what, and so I have my own kind of little experience with that, but I would love to hear yours.
So as far as with other GPs, I haven't gotten any negative reactions. In fact, they're usually like, "Oh, I have deals that we can't do, but I'll send them your way," or yeah, pretty much the general reaction. But I have gotten so comfortable speaking about this stuff that I forget, like I'll be at a restaurant catching up with my best friend, talking to her about, our latest investment in Dame, and like talking about vibrators very openly, and forget that like this is what people next to me are staring at me at the table next to me, because in society this isn't as well accepted as it is in my brain, and as so that other GPs, not so much. LPs I've seen get, potential LPs I've been pitching to, seen get a little uncomfortable, but that's the point. And when they do get uncomfortable, you got to remind them this is why it's such an opportunity. And this is why people aren't looking at here in the space, because most people with capital are not in the target demographic of what we're investing in, and don't understand it and don't want to go there. And so here we are doing it, and the financial return will show for itself.
How big is the pleasure market?
That's a great question. So we have something in our deck that says it's around $180 billion for our whole thesis, which is because pleasure, women's health and sexual health. We actually won't do strictly pleasure. It has to have a health element.
Oh, that's good to know too. Okay.
Yeah, so it has to have health. But we say it's around 170 billion. But the report came out that menopause alone is 600 billion. So what is market size? Yep. As long as when we're looking at startups and we talk about market size, we need to be able to understand how they got to the number. But I think it's always kind of made up. And what do you think?
Well, I mean, for us, I've been watching Frost and Sullivan quote 50 billion for a year now, and I'm like, it's not possible. And came out with 600 billion, and I was like, I knew it wasn't possible. And so we have a small army of amazing MBA interns, and we've crunched the numbers, and we stayed up late, and we debated numbers. We went down to like very, very little minuscule decimals of, does this really qualify or does that not? Like, we would try to be super strict about what did we call femtech and what was supposed to be added in there. And we ended up with $708 billion today for femtech, innovation in women's health and wellness. And by 2025, 1 trillion. So that's what we've come up with. That's what I'm hoping to get into Forbes and promote out there, because that's what we think it is.
That's awesome. And that sounds way better than any forecast I've seen. So I'd love to see how you built that up, and would love to see that in Forbes so everyone knows. Those are the real numbers.
We're working on it. Maybe it'll be out by the time this episode comes, maybe.
That's
but
cool.
Universe, come on. Just trying to find the right Forbes author to get it done. But so I asked you about the market size, but then I also was going to ask, do you know of other pleasure groups investing or investors? Like, have you met any other funds that are doing this?
Yeah. So as far as women's health, Steel Sky Ventures, Vice Ventures will do pleasure. Joyance Partners, we actually co-invested with them at Dame, but they're always looking at pleasure companies. My friend Holly is the lead for sex tech, so we share deals. Who else? I know there's Thrive VC, Listen VC. They're both looking in this space. So there definitely are a good group of others, and Coyote Ventures.
And Coyote. I know Steel Sky is run, a GP is a woman. What about Thrive and Listen? Do they have female GPs?
The people I've worked with there both have been female, although I'm not sure if they're principals or GPs. It's a good question.
But at least they have just because I'm like, whoa. In what industry do all of the major investors have females and all the GP positions? I'm like, I think this, that might be a trend. That's another data that we should look into, because it's very interesting, because women are stepping up. We're saying this is crap. Funding needs to go to this way, and if you're uncomfortable, get out of our way. Fund us.
Exactly.
Get out of our way, you know?
I know there's a statistic that in the US, only 5% of VC decision makers are female, which is so reflective of, the statistic that only 2% of funding goes to female founders. It's like obvious that there's a correlation, whether it's subliminal, whether it's like subconscious or not. The reason why funding is not going here is because of the people in the investor decision making positions. Same thing with LPs, right? Like it all starts with, in my mind, it's like a funnel. The LPs are the most conservative and the slowest to change. VCs are next. Startups are quicker, and then the market. And the market's changed. Like the market's ready for this. The startups are getting there. The VCs are slower. The LPs are not there. And so we're just trying to make it all.
Do you think that there's
flow.
a relation with how old you are? Because I also I haven't met any VCs that are 29 like myself yet. So I'm like wondering, maybe there's also this age difference where the market is like Gen Zs who are like, what's gender really? Like,
Right.
Do whatever you want.
There's 64 genders according to Gen Z.
So
according to Hinge. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the older generation is more conservative. Like even my parents, speaking to them about what I do, I think they get a little bit embarrassed. I know they're very supportive and they love me, but they are definitely more conservative than I am. And I think it's the people who are holding the majority of the money right now are the older age group, and they are definitely the most conservative.
Yeah. Woo! I'm excited about fundraising on this idea of, and you probably did too, right? This idea of Geneva and menopause. It's almost like catering to the older demographic.
Yeah.
We're not just
young,
it's
not just for us.
People in college. We're funding your solutions.
Exactly. Right? Totally. Yeah, and I think most women understand like the need for this kind of innovation. It's really trying to convince the older men, and a lot of them are, a lot of them are accepting. And I don't want to say that most of them are. A lot of them are, but some of them, slower.
But even if they are accepting, they may not be willing to take the jump, right? Like that's not something they're going to talk on the golf course with their buddies, right? Yeah,
right. But a lot of our LPs are older men, so we're really lucky that they did take the jump.
We at Femtech Focus love men. We love all genders, all sexual. We love everybody. This is not a man-hating podcast. I recently went on a date with a guy, and he was like, "So I got to admit, I listened to 2 of your episodes because I was pretty sure you hated men, but I learned that you don't hate men, and I also learned that women watch porn. I didn't know that." And I was like,
"Oh, that's funny."
God. Oh dear God, what episode did you listen to? The risk of putting that on my dating profile,
It's really funny. I have friends that are really in the tech space, and talking to them about some of the companies we're looking at that do have a pleasure element, and they're like, "We just don't think there's a market." I'm like, "That's because you don't think women watch porn."
That's right. Yep.
Which is funny.
Literally. They're like, "What?" Yeah. You said something earlier. I just want to circle back real quick too, because I found it interesting. You said you don't invest in pure pleasure, you invest in health. So can you tease that apart for me? Because someone the other day was asking about like, what do we need? Oxygen and food, and I threw in like orgasms. I was like, to be healthy. So how is pleasure not just health? What else is missing? What's the link?
Yeah. It's a good question. And it's something that like my team and I have talked about trying to flesh out our thesis. And if we can argue that there's a health element to it, there's some pleasure that is actually harmful, like some porn sites that don't have the proper restrictions in place. And so autoerotica, for instance, we think of that as a very healthy pleasure, a really healthy way to have pleasure. And if there's, for instance, meditation audio alongside that we can really get behind. I mean, our doctor on our team is an andrologist, urologist, sexual medicine expert, and she's like, we literally diagnose meditation and erotica together as a medical diagnosis, and that is health. So it just depends on we really need to discuss it internally and make sure we can get on board with it with our thesis for each startup. It's unique for each situation.
Yeah, got it. No, I totally appreciate that. I just think it was really interesting. So I wanted to tap in on that a little bit more. So really, really cool. Well, this has been so much fun. I am so excited for you. I cannot wait to co-invest with you. We are
Yes.
just manifestors, just two ladies chatting on the phone a year ago, being like, we're trying to build something, you know? And like,
Definitely.
here we are, you know?
Definitely.
Investment
Yeah.
deep. I'm 100 episodes deep. Like, we're going.
Yes. Yes. I'm so proud of what you've created and so excited that we're on this journey together.
So cool. So cool. I have two last questions for you that our listeners really love. The first one is, if someone wanted to start a femtech company, what's an area in women's health and wellness that still needs innovating?
That's a good question. I think, right now there's a huge focus on mental health. I think that women go through mental health issues that are just very different from male mental health. So that would be an interesting one, especially, there's a huge focus on it right now during the pandemic when people's morale is low. I know this isn't in femtech, but we're looking at male contraception.
Yes.
That hasn't been blown through, that doesn't have a winner yet. So looking to see who the winner will be.
I love that. Yeah. And I love the mental health one. I've been a mental health advocate for many years. I've been very open about, I was in grad school. I had to go inpatient for PTSD treatment. I've been open about my mental wellness for many years because so many of us struggle and I never heard about it. So I thought I must be the only one. I better keep this under wraps, and then once I shared it, everyone's like, oh, me too. And I'm like, oh, Jesus.
Right.
Right. Well, I'm very concerned about some statistics that recently came out in NPR that alcohol liver disease in women is like out of control because women are self-medicating with alcohol at home based on all of the caretaking they're doing right now and the money issues and the pandemic and the isolation and all the things. And so I'm just like, what out there, I know Alcoholics Anonymous is an amazing program and stuff, but like, even they're not meeting in person, it's all virtual meetings, it's like, is there an app potentially for women that love to drink wine,
Right.
help us moderate that.
That's it. That would be a really successful one, I bet.
Yeah. My goodness. Well, so many ideas. Our last question is, what do you think the femtech industry as a whole needs the most right now in order to be successful?
Capital. I think there are like the founders are there, right? Like they're doing it. There's so many founders. I know that there was a report recently where there's 200 founders in femtech, and that's not true.
Not true.
There are so many. I mean, I think the day my press release came out, I think 200 founders reached out to me. I think there's got to be like, thousands. And I think that they're doing it right. There just needs to be more people supporting them with capital.
Yeah, we at a summit on March 22nd, I reported 565 active femtech startups in the world. Since then, I think we've added like 20 more. It's literally like 10 a week we add that we just come across. Oops, wasn't on it. So yeah, definitely well over 1,000, like easily. So
yeah,
so cool. Well, what do you have any last words for the founders listening? And then also, how can they contact you, send you their deal?
Yeah. Last words. I guess I should just talk a little bit about our thesis so that people know if they would fit in with our thesis, which is we look at seed and Series A startups. So we can't go before seed. And we look in America.
Can you tell us a seed and Series A sometimes in different places it can be different sizes? So can you give us an idea of the range of the size of the raise?
Yeah, so we would look at as long as the valuation we can support above like a $6 million valuation makes sense for us to call it around a seed. And then Series A is we don't have like a cutoff for the top size. Try to get the biggest valuation you can. And then as far as location, we look in America and Europe. So we can't look in Asia. Other continents. And then, I think sexual health and for all genders and women's health. And so that's our thesis. And to contact me, I am always on my LinkedIn. So feel free to send a request there and I can get you in the pipeline.
Perfect. And I love how you said Europe. Why do y'all feel comfortable investing in Europe as well? Because I know most VCs are just like US only, meh, and then they like stop.
Yeah.
Why I'm interested in learning about your European interest.
I should have mentioned that my 2 co-GPs sit in Europe. So Dom,
I thought they were in New York City. That's the like vibe. That's not the case.
Dom sits in London, and that's where Healthy Pleasure Group is headquartered. And then Mafe, Dr. Marigodoy, sits in Barcelona. So
yes, that's amazing. Yeah. They have, well, let them know they have a very New York City vibe. That's what I always pick up on their pictures and their posts and stuff. So that's really cool.
That's so funny.
In Europe. Awesome. Well, this has been so much fun. You are incredible. What an inspiration. Go us. Just
yes.
2 ladies, like if you're listening and you're like, I have an idea, in a year you could be like the queen of it. Okay. So totally. You never know. Just go for it. Just go for it. Just keep asking. And like, why not? Just why not? Of course. Yeah. Why not?
I love podcasts that you do. I love the community you're forming. I love everything about Femtech Focus, and I can't wait to see Coyote Ventures, right, come up, and really, really impressed.
So awesome.
Thanks so much for having me,
Carli.